Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our webinar today on the Hollywood Disability Toolkit, Respectability's Guide to Inclusion in the Entertainment Industry. My name is Lauren Applebaum, and I am the Communications Director of RespectAbility, a nonprofit organization fighting stigmas and advancing opportunities for people with disabilities. And I had the honor of being one of the authors for this toolkit. We have a really great webinar coming up with a lot of great speakers who represent a variety of different jobs within the entertainment industry. So I think you're going to really enjoy that today. And we received a question already if this PowerPoint will be available to download, and yes. Following this webinar, you will be able to download the PowerPoint and reference it later. There's a lot of text on there, and so you don't have to worry about taking notes right now. So why is this important? Well, first of all, it's important to take a look at who has a disability. Most people are unaware that 1 in 5, or 20% of Americans, have a disability. Even more importantly, because everyone is connected to everyone and cares not only about things about themselves, but what their families and friends are, is 51% of Americans report having a family member or a close friend with a disability. And research that we just did a few months ago actually showed that 64% of Americans consider themselves to be part of the disability community. And that meant that they either had a disability themselves, have a family member with a disability, a close friend with a disability, or work in a field with disability. So way more than the majority of Americans are connected to disability in some form or fashion. So we take a look at, diversity means something to everyone, and oftentimes we're talking about diversity in the lens of race or gender or sexual orientation, and it is very common to forget the lens of disability. And so that is what we're trying to encourage today. So I'm going to talk for just a brief moment about the intersectionality between disability and other minorities. So 6 million students have a diagnosed disability in America's public schools today. More than 1,000 African American Black students and more than 1 million, and more than 1.5 million Latino students with disabilities in our schools today. So oftentimes when we see representation of disability on TV, we see a straight white male in a wheelchair. And we advocate for the idea for not only disability inclusion in TV and film, but also for there to be proper representation of all the diversity of people with disabilities. And it's also important to note that between 3 and 5 million Americans with disabilities identify as being part of the LGBTQ community. So what does real inclusion look like? The graphic that is being shown right now shows an example of exclusion with people with disabilities outside the circle, segregation with 2 separate groups, one for people without disabilities and then a special thing for people with disabilities, integration where people with disabilities are part of the circle but still separate, and inclusion where people with disabilities and people without disabilities are fully included in the same exact circle. We have learned that leadership really needs to start at the top. A lot of people are afraid sometimes to talk about having their own disability, especially if it's an invisible disability. But when someone at the top is able to say, I have X disability, it allows people who are coming up this pipeline to then be able to be part of it as well. So I don't think Jose Plaza has the opportunity to join yet. Is that correct? So, okay. So I want to just say a few words about Jose Plaza. He is the manager at California Endowment, and we would not have been able to have this toolkit without the financial support of the California Endowment. And Jose is cares very passionately about disability inclusion. And I'm going to read a quote from him where he said, "There is a difference within philanthropies in terms of their mission. Some are focused on education. Some are focused on labor. Some are focused on racial disparity. Disability is always left out. Disability needs to be front and center." So having people working in philanthropy like Jose who get it is extremely important in order for us to be able to be doing this work in Hollywood. And if Jose has the opportunity to dial in shortly, he will deliver a few remarks himself.
Hi, Lauren. I'm on. I don't know if you can hear me.
Wonderful. I'm turning it over to Jose right now.
Thank you so much, and apologies. I was having some technical difficulties jumping on. But I want to thank everyone. I want to thank RespectAbility for the opportunity to speak today. But more importantly, I want to thank everyone who cares about the issue of disability and the need for awareness and visibility. As Lauren mentioned in my quote, it is important for not only organizations but also for funders to have disability at the forefront of their work. One of the things that I mentioned in some recent presentations that we did with RespectAbility out in California was the need for that visibility to be not only done in the work, but also it has to be entrenched in the funding schemes that we do, in the programming that we do, because visibility matters, and that is at the core of what RespectAbility stands for. It is important that when we talk about issues of representation, we talk about not only those that are marginalized by race, by gender expression, but really by disability, because what tends to happen in circles of funding and circles of programming, specifically with nonprofits, is that we are issue-based, but that intersectionality of work always tends to leave disability out. And it's important that for folks that are on the line, that continue to do this work, that are really at the forefront of this messaging, that if you don't have someone that is able to check your work, to cross-check the mission and the programming that you have, I think that is something that RespectAbility has done great, especially with us here at the Endowment. They're able to tell us how equitable our programming is, how equitable our funding is, and it's something that we want to stress to other funders, to other program heads. It's important to be intersectional on all lenses of work, and ultimately, as we hear from Lauren and other presenters, a lot of the issues that young people are faced early on when it comes to bullying, to discrimination in schools, which is at the heart of the work that we do at the California Endowment. We need to ensure disability is at the center of it all, because more than likely, folks or young people that are over-disciplined in schools, that are expelled at higher rates or suspended at higher rates, more often than not, disability tends to be an issue. When looking at issues of race, when looking at issues of gender expression, disability is always overseen, and other issues are at the forefront. When really our work, being truly equitable, we need to look at those issues. So I'm really glad that the California Endowment has been able to partner with RespectAbility to support this work. It is something that we hope to continue doing, looking at the various intersections of how disability impacts the way of life, how it impacts health, mental health, as it is at the forefront of the work that we do. And I look forward to hearing from folks on the call and answer any questions as needed. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you very much, Jose. And before you go, we received a question about if you had a personal connection to disability, or why are you so drawn to disability? Because I know you're not necessarily able to stay the entire time, so I wanted to give you that question right now.
So I personally am not disabled. but I do have family members that are living with a disability and they're thriving with a disability. In terms of the work that I do at the Endowment, as I mentioned, it is important that that as a health foundation, we look at all issues that impact our community's health. And as I said in the PSA and in the release, disability is not always looked at as a primary issue that impacts community. When in reality, when we really dig into our work, it is at the center of a lot of the reasons why our community is impacted. And when I say community, I mean communities of color, I mean communities that are undocumented, LGBT, and so it's important that for us as a foundation, as a funder, as philanthropy, that when we are doing racial equity work, when we're doing immigration work, or general health work, that we check all the boxes, because usually one of those boxes that is left out is disability, and we are losing large swaths of individuals that are living and thriving with their disability, and it's important that we also look at that resilience and see how we can offer help. And that is where I think, and I know that RespectAbility is a great partner for us to work with, because not only are you all putting disability at the forefront when it comes to media, to messaging, but you're also providing fellowships for students with disabilities. So you're doing a full wraparound service, not only of messaging outwardly, but you're also working internally to ensure that students with disabilities have that opportunity to succeed. And that is at the core of the mission of the endowment. So this is why I'm invested in your work and continue supporting it.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm going to move on now with going into what is in this toolkit and how it can be useful for everyone. So the reason for the toolkit. We know that entertainment professionals across all platforms are working to become more inclusive of minorities. This is our entire community's opportunity to ensure inclusion and equality for all people, including America's largest minority, the 1 in 5 Americans with a disability. Now, there's a monetary reason for this too. Opening the inclusion umbrella is the right thing to do, as well as the economically smart thing, given that the disability market is valued at more than $1 trillion. People with disabilities and their loved ones are your audience. As I mentioned, there are 56 million Americans and 1.2 billion people around the world living with a disability. RespectAbility, we're here to support your success. This guide for disability inclusion is for entertainment professionals who wish to ensure they are as inclusive of people with disabilities as possible. This is a living document that will be constantly updated, so we welcome updates. What we see and hear really impacts our thoughts and feelings, which can have life and death consequences. An increase in positive, diverse, and accurate portrayals of people with disabilities in television and film would significantly help to end stigmas. So a few stats. According to GLAAD, the only place to track people with this representation of characters with disabilities in television, fewer than 2% of scripted television characters, 16, have a disability in the 2017-18 season. Only 2.7% of all speaking or named characters in film were shown to have a disability in 2016. Now that's up from 2.4% in 2015. It's important to note that none of the leading characters in the top 900 films were from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group or the LGBTQ community. And one last stat for you, actors without disabilities play more than 95% of all characters with disabilities on television. Many characters are shown in a negative and inaccurate light. So there's a bunch of different tools in the guide, so I'm going to jump right in. First one is we talk about how RespectAbility and our network of partners can be your partner. A few things that we can help with is helping you, connecting you to different people. For example, Gail Williamson will be speaking later in this webinar, and when we receive requests for trying to find someone, whether you are a big studio or an independent filmmaker asking for help to find an individual with a specific disability, she's one of our go-to people, and we connect you to her, and she's often able to help you find exactly what you're looking for. We try to help working with Kate Fobb of Hollywood Health and Society to provide, expert sources to ensure that when you are writing a script or producing a show, that you're doing so in an accurate way. So I want to go through a few examples of best practice. People always ask, who's doing it right? Where can we look? So if you look in reality TV, Born This Way stars 7 young adults and now 1 toddler who have Down syndrome. The show shows them living their actual life as they go through finding jobs, living on their own, receiving an education, and even getting married. They've won 3 Emmy Awards, including for being the best unstructured reality TV show. In scripted TV, Speechless is a sitcom centered on a family that happens to include a son with cerebral palsy, JJ. JJ is played by Micah Fowler, who also has cerebral palsy, which is important to note. Also in scripted television, NCIS New Orleans features a character in a wheelchair, Patton Plame. Daryl Mitchell, an African-American actor who uses a wheelchair in real life, plays Plame. Let's take a look in children's television. There are 2 examples I'd like to point out. You have Julia and Sesame Street and a new animated show called Pablo. Both are dealing with autism. Pablo is interesting in the sense that the writers and everyone involved with it, the majority of the people involved with the show, have autism themselves. In film, you have The Silent Child, who just won an Oscar a few months ago, which features Maisie Sly, a young girl who is deaf. So you have a character who is deaf played by an actual actress who is deaf. And then in animation, you have Finding Dory, a Pixar box office success, which stars many characters with disabilities. Dory herself has short-term memory loss. She is helped by a whole host of other characters who have a variety of physical and other disabilities. Another section in the toolkit talks about using the appropriate lexicon. And one tool that we think is very important is the National Center on Disability and Journalism. They provide the industry's only disability language style guide. When we started to prepare this toolkit, we originally thought that we were going to have a style guide as part of it. But as we did our research, we found out that the NCDJ already had done one, and it was absolutely fantastic. While it is geared towards journalists, talking about including like AP style recommendations, the top parts of everything that it talks about is extremely applicable for anyone in the entertainment industry. Etiquette. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know how to talk to someone with a disability. And it shows, because sometimes people will talk to an adult with a disability and treat them like a child. So we have a whole section on etiquette and how to interact with people with disabilities. I'm not going to go through all of these. Everyone, we will be sending you a link to the actual toolkit, and you can read it all yourself. But you can kind of see a sampling of this now. We also talk about key terms. And in the disability FAQ, we go through some of them. For example, what is considered a disability? What is the Americans with Disabilities Act? We talk about the inclusion rider, something that's very important in Hollywood right now, and how that can help people with disabilities in Hollywood. Then there's also other things about how to ensure that your website and events are fully accessible. what do you need to know regarding hiring employees with disabilities? And something that we've received a lot of feedback about that people are enjoying is what tax and other incentives do employers have to hire people with disabilities? And that section actually is going to be expanded because we had some volunteers who are very interested in researching that more, not only in California, but across other states, because as we know, many shows and films are shot across the country and internationally. Then we have a whole resources section, from audio description services, closed captioning services, sign language interpreters, to organizations that you can go to if you want to hire a performer with a disability or people with disabilities behind the scenes, as well as employment resources. This is a massive document that we hope includes everything that you could need as you are going through this process. Now I would like to introduce Kate Fobb. She is the director of the Hollywood Health and Society. She's worked in the entertainment field for more than 20 years and is extremely well versed in all of these issues. And I'm going to hand it over to Kate to talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Fobb. I'm director of Hollywood Health and Society, which is a program of the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism Norman Lear Center. So I challenge anybody to have a longer organization title. So there it is, USC Annenberg Lear Center, Hollywood Health and Society. What do? Well, we study and shape the impact of entertainment and media on society. What does that mean exactly? Well, first of all, here are some of our partners. We're funded by the CDC, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We're super excited to be now partnering with RespectAbility on this project. We're also officially partnered with the Writers Guild of America, which is the union that supports television and screenwriters. So they see us as part of their support system rather than a group trying to sort of weasel its way in. So what do? Well, Hollywood Health and Society provides entertainment content creators with information and access to experts on a wide range of topics, from health and medicine to safety and security and more. What the heck does that mean? Well, for example, from 2012 to 2017, we consulted on more than 1,000 aired TV storylines across dozens of networks and streaming channels and cable shows, and these are just a few examples of the networks and streaming channels that we work with. So how do we do this? We offer free services to the entertainment industry. So with our funding partners allow us to be able to offer our services for free to the entertainment industry. They can call us or email us when they're working on a storyline that may involve, for example, someone with a disability. Maybe they want to talk to an expert in that issue. Maybe they want to talk to a person with that disability. Maybe they just need some information and resources from us to help ensure that their portrayal of that character is as accurate as possible. So I say we have operators standing by to take writers' calls and emails. We can get them the information on a quick notice. We understand that the entertainment industry's timeline is fast and furious, and so we're available to get them their answers or connect them with experts as quickly as possible. But in addition to our hotline, we also do outreach to raise awareness among the entertainment industry about certain topics. So we will hold panel discussions. We also take writers on location trips where we pile them into a bus and take them to sort of immerse them into an experience. We have, of course, our website and tip sheets, which are written in plain language and friendly to the entertainment industry, but explain the various health and safety topics that we work on. We have a quarterly newsletter called Reel to Reel that goes out to about 800 entertainment industry professionals, and it's just chock full of stories about real people facing the challenges and living their lives regarding all the health and safety topics that we work on. We also hold the annual Sentinel Awards, in which we honor shows that have depicted a health topic accurately and entertainingly. Lauren mentioned Born This Way. That show has won our Sentinel Award 2 years in a row now, just as an example. We also work with the networks and television shows on public service announcements, and more we've been working with the shows on their transmedia. So people don't just watch a show and that's it. They're usually tweeting about it, or they're on the show's Facebook page, or they're texting with their friends about what's going on in the show. And so we help provide tweets and other kinds of information and resources for viewers to access if they're inspired to do so by a portrayal that they see on television. And we also do research and evaluation. So we look at the impact that these shows and depictions have on audiences' knowledge, attitudes, and even behaviors around their own health and safety. So we do a lot. And I just quickly want to share a little bit about impact, just so you understand why it is we do what we do. We look at the impact that storylines have on audiences, and we know that audiences are motivated often much more so by what they see in a narrative storyline versus a commercial or a public service announcement or even a news story. There's something about being transported into the storyline. When you're watching your favorite show or your favorite character, you identify with that character, and at some point you almost lose all sense of surroundings, and you're in that story with those characters. And when information and accurate portrayals are depicted at that time, it sinks in on a much deeper level. So this is just an example of a study we did recently. The show Royal Pains, which was on the USA Network, called us because they were going to do a storyline about, or they wanted to do a storyline about a transgender teen. And mind you, the actress in the photo that you see with the green streaks in her hair is a transgender actress. So, so that's an example of having a person, play the part for which they represent in real life. So, so they called us because they wanted to make sure that they were as accurate as possible in depicting this topic and also using the proper language and so forth. And so we consulted with them several times in the development of the storyline. Well, we thought this would be an interesting episode to do a study on, to see if this storyline had any effect on people's attitudes around transgender people and policies. Now, this was a few years ago, and so this was a time when there was a lot of discussion in the news about what bathroom to use, and people were all in an uproar and voting about bathrooms and so forth. And this was before Caitlyn Jenner had come out with her story. So we also felt that because USA Network is a very general network that is not a niche market, it's not like if you're watching the show Transparent on Amazon, you're bought into that topic already. But USA Network, it has lots of different kinds of genres of shows and storylines, and so we thought it would be great to see if this episode had any effect on audiences. So what we did was we conducted a study, a pre-test survey before the show aired, gauging people's knowledge and attitudes around transgender people and policies. And then we let the show air, and then we surveyed viewers after the show aired to see if their attitudes had shifted at all. And I'll just show you very quickly So we found that viewing the Royal Pains transgender storyline caused people to have more positive attitudes towards transgender people and more support for trans-friendly policies. It also had a cumulative effect. So people that saw more than one storyline about a transgender person, perhaps they saw another show somewhere else that featured a transgender person, tended to have more and more positive attitudes toward transgender people and policies. And we also saw that there was a reduced link between political ideology and attitudes towards trans people by half. So the more shows they saw, if they had kind of a negative political ideology, that was reduced almost by half. So we know that these kinds of depictions, whether it's transgender or people with disabilities, we know that the more these things are depicted accurately and sensitively, we know that it can affect people's knowledge and attitudes and possibly even their behaviors around the subject matter in their own personal lives. So I'll stop. Well, one last slide. Just to do a little bragging, Lauren brought up Speechless, which we were very delighted to work with when the show was first being developed. The network reached out to us to ensure that they were using proper language, et cetera, and they also were very concerned about how to market the show and to be sure that the language they were using was as accurate as possible. So we were very happy to work with them right from the beginning. And we're also pleased because we work very regularly with the show Switched at Birth, which, if you know, features several characters that are deaf. We've also just in the last 2 years, we've consulted on, we've conducted 49 consultations with shows on disability inquiries, topics including blindness, autism, dyslexia, mental health, many other issues as well. And just since February 1st, we've already conducted 5 consultations with shows on characters with a disability. Some of the more recent shows we've worked on include Claus. They have a character with autism, The Good Doctor, of course. As I mentioned, Switched at Birth, and even shows like Blackish are depicting people with a variety of disabilities. So we're very happy and proud to be working with RespectAbility. And I'll stay on the call till the end, so if people have questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. We really enjoy working with you and love learning from your expertise. I know some questions are coming in, and we're going to address the questions at the end now, because now I would like to go to another great speaker, Donna Walton. Donna is the founder of, well, she's many things, but one of the things that I love about what she does is she's the founder of the Divas with Disabilities Project. She's going to talk a little bit more about that work. Donna also is a member of our board of advisors, and we have done events together in the Los Angeles area, specifically on the intersection of race and disability. So I'm going to hand it over to Donna to talk a little bit more about her work.
Thank you, Lauren. I am so happy to be here, a part of this webinar for this important work that we're doing around inclusion of disability in the entertainment industry. Again, my name is Donna Walton, and I am the founder and director of the Divas with Disabilities Project. And the Divas with Disabilities Project sort of grew out of several things. It first of all grew out of a extension of the work that I do around vocational or rehabilitation of African American women in the District of Columbia, ensuring that they're empowered and they sort of have gainful employment. It also grew out of the need that when I lost my leg 41 years ago, there were no images of myself reflected in mass media, particularly when I would turn on the television. I would never see myself reflected in stories or in film. So that was another motivation for Divas. But the final, I guess, motivation or the impetus for really creating the Divas with Disabilities Project was I did some writing, or reading, I should say, about a disabled writer and activist named Paul Hunt. And he wrote that the mass media, which he defines as including press, film, internet, advertising, television, print, and radio is a strong source of information, whether correct or inaccurate, and it still provides imagery that continues to enforce disability stereotypes. So by portraying disabled individuals in a negative and empowering way, Black women and girls with disabilities are depicted as non-sexual, pathetic, and a burden, or our worst enemy, an object of curiosity, or unable to participate in any aspects of life. Now that was a real motivator, because I knew that narrative had to certainly change in terms of what disability looks like for Black women, or for the inclusion of Black women and for the imagery of Black women. So the Divas with Disabilities Project then became a digital campaign. It launched in 2012, and the whole goal is to create and amplify the images of African American women with physical disabilities. Images have power, and we knew that based on the research, based on the fact that we're not seeing ourselves, and we knew that if we could see ourselves, that would have a major transformation on how people viewed women of color and Black women. So, because our images influence our perceptions of others and ourselves. So, by using the power of images, the Divas with Disability Project helps to shape the perception of what really disability looks like. And we use the term diva and to show that diva and disability can exist in one single person. And also those two terms would sort of get one's attention, because it show that women could be beautiful, they can be empowered, they can be leaders, and be across the spectrum in terms of their personalities. So by creating the Divas with Disabilities Project, as I said, it's a digital movement. It starts online, of course. It has Facebook, and its presence is on Facebook, Twitter, etc. It also has a website. But the way that the Divas are connected, and the way that our work is really sort of motivated, or it's pretty much carried out, is through, we have monthly conference calls whereby divas from around the country come and speak on different topics. We also serve as a resource to the entertainment industry. I think we like to consider ourselves a pipeline for our talented women of color in our aspects. The women range, it's lived experiences, so that their disabilities range and their lived experiences range. So employers can sort of call upon the Divas with Disabilities Project for talent, and for other areas for speaking, for just if they're looking to cast in a particular area. Another initiative that we have with the Divas with Disabilities Project is our Diva State of Mind initiative, whereby we have global diva ambassadors go out around and have these meetup groups, if you will, and do mentoring in schools and rehabilitation facilities to somewhat get to pretty much connect with other young girls and women of color who are not out and about, who are not employed, and who don't see themselves reflected. So that's what part of the Divas Project is to embrace and to empower and to transform what mass media sees as women of color with disabilities. And so if you have any more questions about the Divas with Disabilities Project, I should share with you too, we have core values that we somewhat establish ourselves by, and that's diversity and inclusion, empowerment, image transformation, integrity, and social justice. And so these are the core values that somewhat guide the Divas with Disabilities Project, and I'll be glad to answer any questions for you at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donna. And we are going to go to our last, but certainly not least, speaker, Gail Williamson. Gail is a talent agent with KMR Talent. She has, over the years, represented countless number of people with disabilities in both film and television, in theater. She works both in Los Angeles and New York and elsewhere around the country. So I'm going to hand it over to Gail now to talk a little bit more about her work and why it's so important that we are making sure that we are giving opportunities for these actors with disabilities.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be with you today. KMR is one of the only agencies that we're aware of that has opened their doors to performers with disabilities and has a department specifically for it, our diversity department. And it has that name because basically we started out back many years ago trying to get disability included in the diversity programs at the various studios, which has been accomplished now. I've been doing this for 30 years. I started with the California Governor's Committee for Employment of People with Disabilities. Not quite as long as Kate's title, but close. And I've seen in using performers with disabilities in the media, I think the first 25 years, I saw the growth that I've seen here in the last 5 years. But I think it's because we have so many partners like you have here on the phone today coming together to make a difference, and it's a different time. And I think that social media allows us more interaction and allows us to know more people with more diversity overall. At the KMR office, we work in the diversity department with performers with disabilities specifically, and we cover many areas of entertainment. We cover TV and film, theater, commercials, advertisement, and occasionally modeling when we get calls, but we are not specifically a modeling agency. Just as a thrill to share with you, speaking of theater, the Drama League Award nominations came out today, and we have 2 women who are nominated for outstanding performance. Both Lauren Ridloff in Children of the Lesser God, which just opened, and Katie Sullivan, who played Anna in Annie in Cost of Living. So we're very excited about that, and this is Broadway and off-Broadway. We also have Jamie Burr and Eddie Barbanel, who have Down syndrome, starring in Amy and the Orphans right now on off-Broadway. So it's been a good year for this department and a good year for the talent we work with. My motivation comes from the fact that I've seen such a difference through what the media does. When I was a young mother of a boy with Down syndrome, I could walk into a restaurant and silence it just having him on my hip. But after Life Goes On came on the air, I noticed that people started to talk to my then 10-year-old son. Waiters would now turn to him and ask what he'd like to order, who in the past had always asked us what he would like to order. So it's education is why I do what I do, although we are part of a large agency, which is great. We talked about some of the shows like Good Doctor and Switched at Birth. We just recently had Kobe Bird on The Good Doctor. Switched at Birth, we helped with their Down syndrome storyline and providing them with lots of characters. In Speechless, we have a wonderful time with supplying all sorts of people with various disabilities. We're fairly well known in the industry, and we get calls more about cultural issues with disabilities quite often. And we can assist with helping people with accessible dressing rooms and those sorts of things when needed. Most of all, I think that the importance of this is the way it changes society and what we're able to say and do. And I'm thrilled every time we get someone with a disability in front of the camera. And I'm saddened every time we don't. There are several times we go to bat as advocates when we see a particular role going to an able-bodied actor, and we try very hard to get them to see the importance and the joy and the authenticity that comes from having an actor with a disability play the role. And if we're unable to get anywhere, we quite often been asked, okay, who else with a disability can you put in your program or your film? So that you have somebody who's not disabled playing a role, where else can we do advocacy work? We work very hard at this time trying to get people to recognize smaller roles for people with disabilities. Often when we ask, why can't the attorney be in a wheelchair, I'll be told, well, if he's in a wheelchair, people are going to wonder why he's in a wheelchair. I say, well, he's the attorney because he went to law school, and he's in a wheelchair because he needs it to get around. That would make him a valid attorney. So that I don't get that response from people, we've really tried to push the smaller roles. If we can get used to seeing people with disabilities in roles that don't have very much to do with the show, like just a waiter, a bank teller, someone on the street, someone in the school, someone in the club. If we can have people included in those ways, it'll so much more impact the viewers' accepting of people with disabilities in these various roles, and hopefully lead to more non-traditional roles in the guest star and larger roles. I think most of all, it's just people with disabilities need to be trained. They need to have their to be actors, and we have many who are, which is wonderful, and we're able to propose them non-traditionally, and that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to give them the same opportunity to audition for everything as able-bodied have, and also to lead the way in making this happen, making a difference. We also want to get rid of my department someday, which sounds very silly, but basically we're working towards the goal of having full inclusion in all agencies. And so as many people start out here, we hope that along the way they'll actually find other agencies to transfer to, so that we'll be we'll be able to eventually just get rid of this department completely. Will it happen in my lifetime? No, I don't think so, but I'd certainly like to see it happen. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you very much, Gail. We very much enjoy the fact that your department exists for now, and we share your hope that at some point people with disabilities will be able to just be accepted in every department and it be the norm. So I'd like to, for just a few moments, tell you about a few other resource guides that exist out there if you wanted to learn more. Our guide is focused for people in the entertainment industry, whether you're based in Los Angeles, New York, or anywhere else in the country. It is very much U.S.-centric, but can be, you still can learn a lot if you're outside of the U.S. But if you're looking for more specific disability and you really want to get into some more of the nitty-gritty, one of the ones that we recommend is the Chicago Community Trust. And there is a link here in this PowerPoint which will be sent out to all of you tomorrow. If you're looking for a model of someone really doing inclusion well outside the entertainment industry, it's the Ford Foundation. And Noreen Khan, who is the program officer, she has a really great quote saying, "The specific outcomes and goals of the Ford Foundation is working to achieve simply cannot be accomplished without addressing the needs, concerns, and priorities of people with disabilities." Just like Jose Plaza and the California Endowment, the Ford Foundation is working for full inclusion of people with disabilities, and they did a whole audit of themselves as an organization from the inside within, and there are a bunch of links here as well that if you want to learn more, we wanted to share that with you. And lastly, on a smaller scale, the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington has a toolkit that was originally made for synagogues. But a lot of churches and other religious institutions started using it, and then a lot of nonprofits started using it. It includes a self-assessment where you can go through and answer all of the questions. It is completely private. No one's going to see your answers. And then when you're done, when you complete the self-assessment, it will give you suggestions that you can do if you're looking to be more inclusive in certain areas of your work. So people always ask, well, I'm really inclusive. What is it that I really need to know? So on here, we just have some questions to think about. For example, has someone who uses a wheelchair personally checked the physical accessibility of your offices and programs for people who use wheelchairs? Has a person who is blind and who uses adaptive computer technology checked your website and facilities for accessibility? Do the videos you use have captions? Do you have a way to communicate with people who are deaf or use other adaptive supports? Do you employ individuals who have disabilities? If so, what are their jobs? Do they receive the same compensation and benefits of other employees? So just some questions to kind of think about as you're trying to ensure that your company, that your organization is as fully inclusive as possible. So some next steps. So if you haven't read the toolkit, I highly recommend taking a look. We hope it's a fairly easy read, as you, in addition to being a very educational read. We encourage you to share it with your colleagues and others. Speak with me about your new ideas. As I mentioned, the toolkit is a living document, and we welcome additions. I also want to let you know that we have a new staff person at RespectAbility named Debbie Fink. She's our new Director of Community Outreach and Impact. And she actually will, if you're in Los Angeles, She will be in Los Angeles next week, and if you're not in Los Angeles but you want to be volunteering or working on this project with us, you can be in touch with her, and she would love to hear from you. So I want to just give one last note. Having inclusion in Hollywood is not simply about ensuring that actors with disabilities can have jobs. It also leads to this whole idea of representation. When people see people with disabilities succeeding in TV and film and theater, they're much more likely to want to emulate that in real life. This past year, there was a 4 times improvement in the number of new jobs for people with disabilities compared to the year prior. That meant there were 343,000 new jobs for people with disabilities in this last year. And part of it, I personally believe, is this increased representation of people with disabilities succeeding in what we see in TV and film. So I think all this work really leads to a greater, bigger goal of increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities, not only in Hollywood, but across the country. You'll see this last slide includes contact information for the speakers if you'd like to follow up. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some questions. But Virginia, will you let people know how they can ask a question via the phone, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have dialed in on the phone and would like to ask a question over the phone, you can press 7# on your phone now. That's 7 followed by the pound sign on your telephone keypad, and you'll be placed in the queue in the order received. Just listen for your name to be announced and ask your question when prompted. All participants can submit questions by typing their question in the chat box and, in the Q&A box, and using their mouse to click the Ask button to send it.
So I'm going to ask some questions that have come in via the Q&A box, and if you have a question via phone, I hope you'll queue up, because we'd love to hear from you. So Hester asks about resources relevant to those in the media industry outside of the LA area, looking to cast folks in Northern California as a low-budget organization and not able to bring people from Los Angeles. Well, the resources in the toolkit themselves are applicable to everyone no matter where you live. And some of the different resources are LA-centric or New York-centric or national. Gail, do you want to talk to the idea of, I know you represent people all around the country?
I do. I don't represent, a full range of people in all areas, but it's always worth checking with us because we may have someone in the area, or we may know someone with a school or a program in the area that could help.
And so if you have a specific request, if you're casting somewhere, feel free to be in contact with me, and I'll put you in touch with Gail. Also, there are, just different disability organizations all around the country that we can put you in touch with where they might have someone who would work well for you as well. So Doug asks, says he's producing an independent film with multiple forms of disability featured. I am looking forward to learning more about that, and I hope you'll be in touch. And he asks about the idea of funding sources. So we do not have a list in this resource guide of funding sources, but you're not the first person to ask that. So it's something we are exploring in terms of adding to this online version of the guide. I do want to tell you about an organization. They're based in Los Angeles, but membership is open to people around the entire country, and that's Film Independent. So they're specifically for independent filmmakers. And I know that there is a process to receive grants. I don't know much more about it, but if you reach out to me, I'd be glad to put you in touch with the folks at Film Independent. We have a specific question for Gail from Daniel. He asks, how podcasting and online play more, how can podcasting and online media play more of a role for those of us with disabilities?
It's a great question, and it's kind of referred to it a little bit with social media. I think that we have people with disabilities able to reach a larger community of people through the internet. I have a few clients who have regular podcasts. I have clients who have their own little storylines they run on social media and smaller things. It's a great way to get noticed and to get awareness. I think it's a wonderful thing to be doing. Am I answering this question? Yes, there's a role. That's wonderful. I think it's a great thing to get involved with. Anybody can do a podcast. You just need a little bit of equipment.
Thanks. Did Donna or Kate want to talk to that at all?
Hi, this is Kate. Yeah, well, I would just agree with Gail. It's definitely the internet is such a wonderful way to get started and even create visibility. People with small shows that have started on YouTube are now making big network and studio TV shows. So it's not impossible at all. And in terms of podcasting, same thing. It's super easy to get started doing that, and it seems to be something that more and more people engage in and look for great podcasts. I actually have a filmmaker friend who sends me a weekly update on the cool podcast that he's listening to. So I think definitely it's an easy way to get started, and it's definitely not something that would not get noticed. So I encourage it.
Do we have any questions via phone?
No questions at this time.
Okay. I know we have gone over our time. I want to let you know that a woman named Danny has informed me that they have launched an award for films about inclusion. This looks really great. And Danny, we're going to definitely be in touch. And as we hear more about this award that you are doing, it's something that we will definitely promote. And so all of you will be receiving more information about that as we learn. And so Doug, maybe you can apply for that and receive some funding that way. I love these webinars for things like this where we're able to connect everyone. It's a wonderful way of connection. Just checking, we do have a question for Kate Fobb or Gail. On occasion, this is coming from Delbert. On occasions where people call to ask assistance with crafting a story or plot line that incorporate people with disabilities, if it becomes clear that this is a continuing theme of a TV series, do you recommend they hire someone with that disability for the writer's room or producing team? It just strikes me as a great opportunity to add new disability professionals in the Hollywood employment pipeline.
This is Gail.
Hi.
I think Kate's going to be able to
Go
talk
ahead,
to
Gail.
better than me. But I talk to casting directors. If I get a chance to talk to a producer, definitely I would talk about that. But I'm talking to casting usually, so I don't get the opportunity that Kate would get.
Yes, and we often have shows that come to us for the first couple of episodes or in the planning stages if it's a long story arc, and then they realize that they probably should have somebody on staff that's consulting about the topic, in which case we can connect them with consultants and we let the consultants make their own arrangements with them. We've done that on a number of occasions for various topics, including for speechless. So yes, that is something. I mean, usually if it's an episodic show and it's just one episode that they're going to feature this particular topic, or 2 episodes or something like that, it's a short story arc, they don't feel that they can afford or need to hire a consultant just for that, and they use us. But if it is something that's more ongoing, usually the shows are interested in hiring, and we definitely can point them to individuals.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if Kate, Donna, or Gail has anything else they'd like to add before we conclude this webinar? Nope. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating today and for sticking with us as we went over our time. As I mentioned, we will be sending out both the PowerPoint as well as a YouTube of this webinar that you can listen to again or watch, or as well as a transcript. Respectability is very excited about the work that we are doing in Hollywood. We are always looking for new partners who want to work with us, learning about what it is that you're doing and if there's a way that we can support the efforts that you are doing as well. So please do not hesitate to contact me. My email address is laurena@respectability.org. You'll see up on the sheet that it has everyone else's contact information as well if you would like to learn more about the work that they are currently doing. And I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.